Okay, according to YouTube, I am live. It's a little bit weird because they changed their viewer, their back end, so that I have this completely different interface, and I'm looking for the button and trying to make sure I did everything right. I think I did. So we can start today's in the studio with Angela Fehr. And today we're going to talk about cultivating a daily painting practice. This is something that I've been thinking about doing for me. And so I wanted to talk about it with you. I'm also sharing my building today. My studio is in the above the garage of our home, our home outbuildings. We have a shop and a garage, and then the studio up above the garage. So when my husband's home, he's in the shop, and my daughters are both doing work experience. One is in town at a toy store, helping this week, learning a little bit about retail and small business. And then my other daughter, Samantha, is here working with her dad, learning a little bit about the construction industry. And so yesterday they were doing some carpentry on a job site, and then today they came back and they're sanding and staining lumber in the shop. So kind of neat to have my girls doing something a little different than just their usual school, and to realize that we're in a new phase of life where we have just going in different directions with our kids and seeing them make choices about their future, and thinking about driving lessons and driver licensing, which is coming up for my oldest very soon. So yeah, that's a little bit piece of our life. And as I'm talking, I can hear the garage doors opening. I think they've got to run some errands in town. I bet they ran out of sandpaper, actually. That's not really a problem for me. As my business here is painting, I very rarely have to run to town for emergency supplies because I have so much stuff. I have a little phobia of running out of paper. So I always make sure I have a lot of watercolor paper in the studio, and I really try not to hoard it. Anyhow, so I'm rambling a bit, but I just thought it was just had a kind of a. It was just kind of nice this morning to just be thinking about our family and the ways our lives change over time, and that really does affect how I run my business here too. My schedule is very dependent on my kids, so and their schedules. So that's that. Okay, so we're going to talk about cultivating a daily painting practice, and then I'm going to actually do my daily painting here on camera for you, and we'll talk about that as well. I haven't. Oh, where to start? I made some notes to help me, but I wanted to first talk a little bit about why I've started thinking about trying to do daily painting, and what that looks like for me. It's funny because I think people think I just paint all the time, and it's sort of true. I'm almost never not thinking about painting, and because I love what I do so much. I love also that I've been able to make it into a business where I get to teach. So I'm always thinking about teaching. I'm always thinking about painting. I'm always thinking about you and what you might want to learn and need to hear. Mostly I think about what I'm excited about learning, and then I want to share it with you. So it's not like I'm sitting there thinking what I can preach to you next, but it's more just what I'm excited to share with you because it's new and interesting for me. And one of those things is daily painting. I've never wanted to put a lot of pressure on myself to be bound to commit to something like that. I see often artists who say, I'm going to do 100 paintings in 100 days, and they're pursuing that. And I actually have a friend, she's an amazing, I love the way she markets her art on Facebook. Corey Hardiman is her name. I'm going to put that in the chat so you can see how it's spelled, because she's, I think, an oil painter, actually. And she lives down, I think, near Vancouver somewhere, down south. It's all south. Everything's Vancouver when I think about southern BC. But she was posting on her Facebook page a new painting every day this year was her goal. And I think she got sick, and so she hasn't been as faithful as she wanted to be. But almost every day this year, she's like at, I think she was at 280 or something for 365 days of the year. So she's done amazing. with her challenge, really, if you think about it. And for me, I just really didn't want to commit to something where I knew I was going to fail. 100 days of painting, even 30 days of painting feels like too much for me. And so I haven't gone there. At the same time, I recognize the value in painting regularly. And certainly my art has grown so much through cultivating a regular painting practice. And of course, you know that I paint every week. When my children were small and life was just very much where I couldn't leave them, I was very bound to their schedules. My goal was to complete 3 paintings that I could be proud of every year, and that was about what I did for about 5 years there. When they were tiny, it was if I got 3 paintings done, I felt really good about that. The problem with not painting very often is when you do make time to paint, it can feel like a lot of pressure. If I only have, I don't know, 15 periods where I'm painting in a year, then there's a lot of pressure to produce good things in those time periods. And so when you're painting every day, you do release yourself from some pressure to perform because, you just have frequency on your side. If you're painting 365 days out of the year, hopefully you're going to have a handful of those that turn out that you can feel proud of. And the artists that I've been following, actually, what really got me thinking about this was there is an artist, I'm going to put his name in the chat, Yang Hong Zhang, and he's on Instagram. And I didn't realize just the other day he just reached like 50,000+ followers on Instagram. And I was like, wow, that's a lot of people. And he said he's been posting daily paintings for, I think the past 5 years. Like it was a period of years. And I love his paintings. He does beautiful watercolor paintings. He's the kind of artist that makes you want to just quit because his stuff is so good. No one could just measure up. We all think that sometimes. Don't judge me. So I was looking at his art and it's beautiful. And when I read that he was painting every day, well, then it makes sense that his work is that powerful and fresh, because through that daily painting practice, he has cultivated his skill and gotten to the place where he can paint without obsessing over making every painting kind of perfect. And we tend to do that when I think a lot of overworking comes out of that obsession with trying to get it perfect, because this is the painting and we just have to keep digging at it until we get it perfect. I don't know if that's ever happened to you, but it happens to me. So when you're painting every day, you're released from that pressure. You have always tomorrow's painting where you can try and get it right again. We know that daily painting is going to add to your brush miles, so you're going to accumulate brush miles very quickly. Because you're painting every day, you're also going to be developing your style. You're going to be wielding your brush with more confidence. You're going to, especially if you use a time limit, most of us don't have 8 hours a day to paint our daily painting. So maybe you're compressing that daily painting into 15 minutes. So you're learning how to edit down to the essentials and get to the point in your painting. And you grow your creativity muscles. A lot of times when we don't paint frequently, when we do go to paint, we feel like we don't have any ideas. And I've realized that ideas birth other ideas. So the more I paint and grow stronger at looking to see a composition almost everywhere I go, it becomes much easier to choose a painting subject. They're just everywhere. And that volume, again, it means when you're building volume and painting every day, you have less pressure to perform. That one painting doesn't quite mean so much. And you see your measurable progress much more rapidly than if you're painting, maybe once a week. So those are some really good reasons why you might want to consider a daily painting practice. There are obstacles that are going to make it harder. And that's what we're going to talk about as well. And for me, I guess what really struck home was looking at Yang Hong Zhang's paintings, was seeing that, he he was presenting one. It really benefited him as an artist. I'm painting frequently for you, my students, but I also need to paint for myself to build my own skill. And so I wanted to bring into my painting practice that regular personal development, which I feel like I'm not always as focused on as I would like to be. So I'm excited to be thinking about painting every day for that reason. I want to be intentional about how I paint. If I'm going to be painting every day, I want to be intentional about how I do it. I certainly don't want this to become another opportunity to just paint lessons for you that don't necessarily grow my own skills and push me to become the artist I want to be. So I want to make my daily painting practice a time for personal growth. I met 2 years ago. I met the founder of Inktober, which just wrapped up here at the end of October. Jake Parker. He's an illustrator from he was from Utah. He's living in Arizona now, and it was neat talking to him. He said, if you want to see something really have an impact. For him, Inktober was really powerful in his career. It has brought together thousands of artists from all over the world who use the Inktober prompts to do their own sketches and paintings using ink. And in fact, I had one of the artists I follow on Instagram used Inktober prompts to do a writing daily practice. And she wrote a paragraph every day using one of the prompts from Inktober, which I thought was so clever as a way of making it her own. And Jake Parker was saying that the people who succeed the most or who do the best with the whole Inktober theme are people who are very intentional about how they use the prompts. They're not just there to just get ink on the paper, but they actually have chosen maybe a goal that they're trying to achieve through Inktober. Jake Parker himself, when he does Inktober drawings, he will choose a theme. He had this year, I think he'd had a cartoon series he'd drawn in the past called Skyheart. And so he was drawing every day characters that lined up with the Skyheart comics that he'd done using the prompts I think he used the prompts that he'd given. And using the prompts was totally optional. His main goal was to get this practice of drawing those characters in new and interesting ways. And my friend Lindsay Wyrick, who you might know as the Frugal Crafter on YouTube, she made Inktober her goal to draw hands every day of Inktober. And she took the prompts and she drew hands in different poses to strengthen her ability to draw hands. I know we all need practice at drawing hands. Lindsay did amazing thinking of creative ways to put hands, line them up with these different prompts. And she had zombie hands and artist hands and just hands doing different things. It was really fun and fascinating to watch that progression on Facebook. So I loved seeing how she took a challenge and rather than just saying I'm going to participate and be totally at the whim of whatever the prompts are. She had a focus and then she developed it from there. Focused practice will achieve more than an unfocused kind of willy-nilly scattershot method. But the main thing is to be steady and consistent. Steady practice achieves more than bursts of intensity. And I realized that this week when I started a new workout program because at the beginning of the year, I love to run, but at the beginning of the year, I started doing some strength training as well and some different like body weight resistance stuff where you're doing a lot of push-ups and a lot of squats. And the first day after that workout in January, I could barely walk. And then, I was pretty faithful all through the winter and spring. Kind of summer, I fell off the wagon. So I restarted doing some of that body weight stuff. And guess what? I'm just as sore as I was in January. The burst of intensity, certainly now I know a little more what to expect. And I'm probably a little stronger than I was in January, but I'm just as sore. So recognizing that if I just done a little bit every day instead of feeling like I have to do a whole bunch, sporadically, I'm probably going to achieve more and be more faithful and consistent in my discipline. And when you have been doing something consistently, there's a lot of motivation not to quit. The language, I'm so excited. I'm going to Italy next year, and the language program that I'm using Duolingo to learn a little bit of Italian. And my Italian workshop sold out. Can you believe it? So they're already asking me where I want to go in 2021. So where do you think I should go? Anyhow, so the language program I'm using, Duolingo, they tell you every day you have a 7-day streak, you have a 10-day streak, you have a 40-day streak. And when you're 40 days into that streak, you don't want to break the streak. It's meaningless. It doesn't really change much if you fall off the wagon and miss a day. But there's that little incentive, like, I don't want to break the streak. I want to see how far I can take this. And I'd sure like to have that with my painting practice as well. So we're going to just move over to my work surface. I have some, I want to show you some sketchbooks. I think using a sketchbook for a daily practice is a really good way to kind of be consistent, to make it portable, to work in a steady size, and also to have that progression of seeing, from page 1 further on to the end of the book. And so I have my sketchbooks over here, and I just found my camera cord, which I was looking for, and I'll turn the microphone so you can still hear me. This sketchbook, isn't it beautiful? This one I got from my workshop in Ontario, and it's got the birch bark cover and then beautiful Arches paper inside it. I haven't put paint on it yet, but I'm thinking I might do that today. I hoard sketchbooks a little bit, so you can see I have quite a stack here. The main thing you're going to want to look for when you're looking for a sketchbook is check the paper out, give it a feel. If you can open it up and take a look at the paper, that's really helpful. This is my Etcher sketchbook, and I have reviewed these, I think, on my YouTube channel. They're not perfect paper by any means. But it's actually pretty good. It's maybe a little bit more absorbent than you might see with 100% cotton. They have their signature series sketchbook, which is Fabriano paper. It's really nice. I have this Bockingford. It's called a Fat Pad. I like a spiral bound sketchbook because they open really nice and flat. And later today you will see I'm going to be showing off on YouTube my Daniel Smith dot card, so you can take a look at that on YouTube this afternoon. So the Bockingford Fat Pad, these are more likely to be found if you're in the UK or Europe. I would look for probably this one to be my sketchbook. It is actually not 100% cotton, but it is a really nice paper. And Etcher has a couple more perfect sketchbooks. These, I would say, are almost as good as the Signature Series sketchbook. I think the paper's not quite as good as the Fabriano, but they're close. And they come in several sizes. This one is made by Two Rivers, so again, another UK manufacturer, and the Two Rivers sketchbooks are very handmade paper. You can see that looks almost like a Khadi or a Shizen paper. It has that really earthy texture, which is really pretty. And I've played with it a little bit. I'm not sure I have anything in here worthy of showing you. Anyhow, I have a start. And then I really do like the Wiro pads from Indigo Art Paper, and that's a handmade paper as well. And these are, Roberta, you'll remember this one from our plein air painting in Saskatchewan. And these have a lovely little slip sheet in between each page, which I think is really lovely and gives you that kind of premium feel. See, there's our church again. So those are just some of the different sketchbooks I have in the studio right now. I'm always looking for the next great sketchbook. But really, I like having one that's small enough to fit in a pouch so that I can put it with my Perfect Painter or my portable painter palette and have that to tote along with me when I go places. So I'm going to use my lovely birch bark palette or paper today, and see if we can't. I'm gonna have to move my water. That's just how it's gonna go. I think that should work. And I'm not working on the first page because it's a lot of pressure to paint on the first page of a piece of paper. And got to turn on my reference photo. My goal for daily painting is, I was trying to think about it. Do I paint the view out of my studio window every day? Do I take it along with me and try to paint plein air? And I do want to paint plein air, but I can't make myself feel obligated to do that every day because I don't go places every day, so I don't always have much. I don't know. I mean, I have the view outside of my window, but I really don't want to paint that every day. I want to be able to paint from my photos and the interesting things I've seen and done. And where is my... There it is. My Versatile. And so I have a photo. I'll show it to you. This picture is 3 years old, but it's from this time of year. And this is what my world looks like these days. Especially in the mornings, you have that kind of pinky cast to the sky as the sun rises very softly. In the, well, not early morning, I would say between 7:30 and 8 right now as our sun is coming up. And the days are getting shorter. But I love that opportunity to really explore the subtlety of color in the warm and cool, in the landscape. And there we go. Feeling awkward about working with this reference photo today. It's kind of gloomy out and there's a lot of glare. And so I have some notes here on how to make daily painting a little easier. That's what I want to talk about as I start painting. One thing you can do is choose a theme. So like I said, maybe it's a goal to paint plein air. Maybe it's a goal to paint a particular subject. So you want to grow better at painting landscapes, so you're going to paint nothing but landscapes. You want to get better at painting trees. You can get even narrower and just focus on just trees, you know. Maybe it's architectural subjects and you're going to focus on that. And I think I shouldn't be so desirous of going right to the edge of a sketchbook because sometimes then it bleeds into the binding, and I'm not sure about that. So we're just going to get that first layer, the top of the sky down. It's kind of a gray blue, so I've got lavender, and I actually added a little bit of cobalt teal to it, and then I've got some palette dirt, you know, to help kind of soften it a bit. Add that bit of neutral. There's a little dust bunny too. I don't know where that came from. I'm not sure what pink I should choose. I think I'm going to improvise a little bit. I'm going to go with some wisteria, which is kind of a little more, it's not as pink, it's a little more, it's got a little more violet in it than what my photo's telling me, but I think it'll be pretty. And then maybe I can add a little bit of a reddish tint to it. Let's see here. I've got Holbein's Bright Rose. Actually, that's Opera Pink. We'll touch into the Opera Pink and the Wisteria and see what we get. That's kind of pretty. Because the Wisteria is a bit opaque, you know, that color's a little bit cloudy. And we'll make our horizon go right about there. And then the landscape changes back to blue again. But I'm going to work from the road, I think, from here. And let's take a look at that, because this is where I learned to observe. My road goes to that narrow point, and I really tend to mess up when it comes to perspective a lot of the time, because look at the bottom of the screen how the road is really almost filling the paper at this point. It's a very dramatic vanishing point. And so we want to be aware of that and not paint it too narrow here. If I chicken out and I just have that little skinny road that's something like this, it's going to not give that same sense of distance and scope. So I want to get that right. And that means being a little bit brave because there's a part of me that wants to hold back and not get that kind of drama in. So it really comes out to almost here. And we're going to start it here. So then I just have to connect the dots, right? And actually, no, that's not even right because if you look, whoops, if you look in here, and I'm not sure how well you can see that, but it almost changes angles here because this is a hill. So it's the vanishing point is very consistent to about here, and then all of a sudden it very sharply just goes up. And so if I don't do that, I won't get that feeling of that hill. So I have to change my road a bit. And this is learning to observe. So I think if I didn't get that angle right, if I just went with that long diagonal, what would end up happening is it would look like Saskatchewan. It would look like a flat road going off into the distance. There would be no feeling of that hill. So we're going to just do that straight line right there. And then we're going to whip it out to the side here. And then here we end up going to here. And I have no idea. I think I blew it still. I think I should probably be going to here. So we'll adjust and see if we can't fix it still. Nice thing about watercolor is as long as it's wet, we can move color around a bit. So I can make those adjustments and teach myself the correct way to paint this. I'm going to soften as well. And that softness gives me that room to make adjustments also. So yeah, this is the challenge of trying to get perspective. And because of that road being in this nice man-made object, really, it's got that very crisp shape. We can't, if it was a grove of trees, you know, I could kind of edit it a little bit more, improvise a bit and create some irregular shapes and have a little bit of grace. But it's really a little harder when you're working with putting in those man-made objects, which is, I confess, a reason why I often paint natural elements rather than putting in man-made stuff. It's a little less forgiving. I also love painting nature. I think there's something about painting the natural beauty of the natural world that definitely is this soul connection. It's not just that I'm a big chicken and I don't want to paint man-made stuff. It's a little bit of that. So we're using palette dirt and a little goethite to get that kind of earthy brown. And I want to use some violet too, so I think I'll use a bit of moon glow to get those trees kind of into my painting. And you can see I've got some color bleeding into my road, and we could consider this a first layer that has that softness. In the first layer, I don't like to put a lot of hard edges because then you really are committed to, they tend to stick around throughout the rest of the painting. And so with some more softness in there, I do have some freedom to make adjustments in the second and future layers. I'm also, though, because with the goal of daily painting, I'm also planning to, do a minimal amount of layering. I might do second layer details. I like that little stripe of moon glow along there. It's a little bit, really in my photo, I've got a lot of white space here. There's not a lot of trees, so I've put in more trees than my reference photo shows. So that's some artistic license based on what I know about our landscape. Around here, it wouldn't be inconceivable to have trees along the edge of the hill. So I can put them in if I think they serve the painting's composition. Let's put in some blue shadowy snow, give that feeling of morning shadow on the landscape. There's not a lot of sun touching Not a lot of light yet, so there are a lot of blue shadows. And I'm going to go a little stronger with my blue here. There's also some shadows that kind of where the road goes up the hill. And put some there too. That's a little bit of cobalt blue. And we could actually come right down the middle. See if we can't get a little bit of that texture where we see the tread of tire tracks and the snowplow and so forth. Okay, I have to let it dry so I can add my details, or at least let the paint kind of soak in a little bit and be absorbed in. I like working with a sketchbook that has really good paper like this. It sure makes it easier to paint when it's consistent to what the paint paper I'm accustomed to. So yeah, so that's that makes it a little bit easier. Oh, Roberta's talking. I'm just going to take a look at the chat here. So if you have questions or comments, you feel free to leave them right now. The plein air artist painting from her car. Yes, that's Sherry. And I talked to her. If I had been thinking when I was in Montreal, I would have tried to get together with her, Sherry Blockhoff. And she also has an Instagram account, and she's amazing. She actually, I ended up talking to her. She was out of town when I was in Montreal, or we could have gotten together. She's also friends with Mark Taro Holmes. And I loved what she said. She said, you know, if it's so cold that I have to add alcohol to my paint in order to keep it from freezing up, it's too cold to paint. So I liked seeing that. But her beautiful, her sketches, her daily paintings are so beautiful. And she spends a lot of time painting outdoors. So that whole, I do think there seems to be a little bit of a marriage between daily painting and painting plein air. If you're a daily painter, you have to sometimes take your paints with you when you go places. And so taking the time to pack that little pouch and have your paints on hand, really, really helpful. Now, I have my portable painter, which I like using because if you've seen it, you know it has the water containers on the side, and you can actually park it right on your lap, and it kind of fits between your the width of my thigh kind of holds it in place, and so I like using that. But there's sometimes where I actually need to have a water container that's not attached to my palette. And so I am actually waiting for the mail because I have a small palette coming to use for portable painting as well. And my Daniel Smith dot card, this is one I used. These will be coming with me to my workshops in 2020. And it has 18 of my favorite colors, and I'm going to try putting all 18 into a small portable palette so that I can see, is this a good palette for painting on the go? I'm looking forward to trying that. A few comments about having the indigo sketchbook and being afraid to paint on it. Remember, well, you already saw that I'm a sketchbook hoarder, but do remember that paper's purpose is to be filled. It's a really satisfying and exciting feeling to see those sketchbooks start to fill up, to flip through and see, you know, what you've achieved. Everything in that book form feels really exciting. It feels exciting to be able to see that growth in one place. Then it's not just lost. A whole bunch of people who are hoarding sketchbooks and not painting in your wire pads. That's awesome. Let's make it our goal to start filling those sketchbooks. If you could make your goal, not even just daily painting, but getting that sketchbook filled, what would that look like for you? Okay, so I want to just go over one more time a few ways. I kind of talked about it while I was painting, and uh, if I ramble long enough, maybe we'll be able to get a few details placed in that little sketch because it didn't really look like much. It's kind of a blurry mess, although we do already feel that feeling of the road, so that's working. That's good news. Okay, so ways to make daily painting easier. If you're wanting to paint daily or more consistently, one way to do that, we talked about choosing a theme. Maybe it's a subject like Lindsay Wyrick's hands. Don't choose a theme that's going to discourage you though. If you're not at a place where you're ready to paint hands and ready for that big challenge, choose something that feels more achievable. Another option would be to choose an artistic principle to pursue for your daily painting. Maybe you want to get better at working with a limited palette. And I was following someone on Instagram just the other day who, I can't remember his name, I'm sorry. He was painting with two colors. He was using indigo and an orange for his paintings, and they were beautiful. I loved how masterfully he painted with just those two colors. So choose a limited palette and focus on getting really good at mixing those colors in just that limited palette. You could choose to do a season of value studies where you're working at building and exploring contrast. Maybe you want to focus on abstracts and just do abstract warm-ups and make that your goal for every painting session. Another thing that really works is really a good idea is to set a time limit. To say, I'm going to do daily painting for at least 15 minutes every day. Most of us can carve out 15 minutes from our day. So, that's achievable. And that was what I did when my children were tiny and I wanted to paint, but I didn't. And I felt guilty about the days I didn't get time to paint. And when I said to myself, if I just get 15 minutes this week, I'll be happy. And so I would make that goal of getting those 15 minutes, and then I could feel like I'd accomplished something. And usually those 15 minutes turned into 30 or 45, and I was able to get to see growth because I made my goal just that guilt-free 15 minutes. Allow yourself some grace. Don't feel like you need to. It's not a law. No one's going to slap your hand if you miss a day, if you get sick, or you decide to take weekends off. Or maybe what you need to do instead is give yourself an alternative. If I don't have time to paint today, I'm going to journal about painting, or I'm going to just use a pencil and sketch, thinking about values. Make a goal to give yourself a little freedom to elaborate within those bounds. Maybe you come to the studio. Maybe it's just getting your painting stuff out and going through your sketchbook for 15 minutes and thinking about what you're going to do next. That can count as part of your daily painting process. I mentioned already, set up a kit that you can take anywhere. Travel brushes, travel palettes aren't usually too expensive. You can make your own and make it really portable. The artists who paint every day, they really have set it up for success. They have their painting stuff nearby. It's not the fanciest setup. Some of those watercolor travel easels take so long to set up. There's so many complicated pieces. Mark Holmes, he prefers to just hold it in his arms and walk around. And so he's made it really easy. He doesn't have to spend a lot of time in setup. He's just ready to go. Use a sketchbook. It offers a consistent size and a smaller format, so you're not having to prep paper. Again, it's ready to go. All your work is in one place. Have several sketchbooks. Have one in the car. Have one in the house and one in the studio. Have it in different spaces. I'm often in the evenings in the living room with my family, so having painting stuff in the living room and not just here in my studio helps me to be doing that daily practice. We want to be judgment free. The goal is to move the brush. It's not to make that perfect painting, but it's just to get that time invested. And another good thing to do is to create some accountability for yourself. Maybe it's dating those pages. Maybe it's as simple as that, just dating the page and numbering it in your sketchbook. Maybe it's posting it on social media. Day 2 of my daily paintings, day 3, day 4. Maybe it's finding a friend that you can be accountable to. Date and document your progress. Having a date on your sketches is really helpful when you look back and you see how far you've come. Sometimes it's funny because you can flip through a sketchbook and you can be like, this time last year I was painting the same subject too. I can see that this time of year inspires me. So those are other things to think about as you're cultivating that practice. If you have tips, I'd love to hear them. If you're doing some daily practices that I'd love to hear about it. Taylor says, I believe the artist on Instagram using indigo and pyrrole orange was Anders Sanderson. That might be right. He was featured on the Daniel Smith Instagram account just the other day, so that was pretty cool. And they featured one of my paintings last week too, which was such a nice surprise. What a treat. Pam says waterfalls. Are you painting waterfalls now, Pam? Shelly says, I love that you took some supplies into the house. I moved upstairs from the kitchen table and I think I might need to keep the portable palette downstairs. I love it. It's really hard if you just have one set of supplies because you're going back and forth and you're always running to get the next thing. And I have a lot of watercolor supplies. I don't know why I don't have more kits. And in fact, Roberta, when I was teaching plein air workshop in Saskatchewan, I won the door prize, which instructors should never win the door prize. That was embarrassing. But it was this beautiful travel pouch from 31 Gifts that has, little compartments, and it's perfect for painting on the go. And so, I can have that filled and in the car or in the living room and something else in the car. And so then I have just different options. If you keep some painting stuff in your vehicle, it'll be interesting because if you are then that sketchbook is going to be full of paintings that were painted away from your home. So that would be interesting as well. Brenda's asking if those are watercolor canvases behind me. No, those are just regular canvases. I've been certain things irritate me, and one is the lack of proportional decor in our church. If you're ever in a building that's like a large auditorium and you've got decor items that belong in a regular sized house, they just look too small. So I bought some big canvases and I'm like, I'm going to paint these. We're going to put them up in the church. So I've got the canvases. Now the goal is to get them painted. So it's kind of nice because it's a little bit of a change of pace from painting in watercolor, is then I grab some of the old acrylic paints that I have kicking around the studio, and I get to fool around with, what might look good in that large auditorium. Pam's just commenting on painting the same reference photo about 10 times. I'm about ready to give up and then I'll probably actually achieve it. Yes, that's true. That's what we do. The more you paint, the more you create conditions for you to be able to paint more like you. So that's our goal. Brush miles, growing your skills. We're going to move back to the work surface because my paper has dried quite a bit. So we can add a few more details before we call this finished. Just taking a look at it, you can see there's a lot of softness there and there's not a lot of value contrast. So I want to create some contrasts in here. And I think some line, right? So let's find my reference photo again. Often one goal that I have for myself when I'm painting in the studio, the last couple, I've been doing these daily paintings for about 4 days now, so I'm getting really good at them. But one thing that I've been thinking about as I do them is at this point I haven't settled on a topic or anything like that. So I'm getting locked into line already really fast. I'm going to focus on maybe just a bigger dark shape. And then we'll pull some tree branches out in a minute. Okay, so this shape here will define the negative shape of the road going up the hill. And then we kind of flare out. That's better. And then as we grow closer to the viewer, we're going to end up with more distinct tree shapes. Excuse me. So at this point, I have not committed to a topic, and I don't know if I will. At this point, I just kind of exploring this idea of daily painting. And so I want to feel free to just choose whatever is inspiring me in the moment. But as I continue, it's very possible that I'll start thinking of a theme that I'd like to pursue or explore. And so I'm going to try to stay open and aware of that potential. And then who knows where we'll end up. And it's kind of exciting to think about. So moon glow, a little bit of goethite just to create kind of a warm pop of kind of diversity. It'll help give that sense of distance if we're changing color temperature a little bit. We're not just that same steady moon glow from this end to this end. Changing value can help with that too. And then I think I might end up adding some blues in there at some point, but we'll see. I'm going to give it a little bit of time yet. I'm also not making this a really hard edge. It's kind of a straight line right now, so now we go in and we break it up a little bit, just like nature. Things tend to not be perfectly straight until we get to the man-made stuff. And even then, I mean, the snowplow driver may not have gone completely straight down the road, so the mark made by the shadow of the snow might be a little irregular as well. But see how line just immediately starts bringing that painting to life. I have got some good questions. Bev, I like your question because it's something I haven't talked about this in a while. I don't use a blow dryer to dry my paintings. That's a good observation. I really don't. I don't even have a blow dryer in my studio. Very, very rarely, if I'm doing a lesson and filming a lesson and I want to move on to the next phase quickly, I might pull a blow dryer out just so I can film the next phase of the lesson. But most of the time, almost 100% of the time, I will not use a blow dryer to dry my paintings. I don't do this because I really feel like when you start blow drying your painting, you're speeding that drying process, and you're kind of removing the opportunity for the paint to continue to do its work. When I'm working with flowing soft color, look at how pretty that is. When I'm working with soft flowing color, it continues to move and change and evolve as long as that painting is drying. So as soon as I get that blow dryer out, I'm kind of robbing the paint of its opportunity to do its beautiful thing. And the other thing that happens, and maybe you don't want it to keep changing, maybe you like it just the way it is, but I don't feel like that happens when we blow dry. The other thing that happens when we start to run that blow dryer is the paint gets absorbed into the paper in a different way. And there have been times where I've blow dried and it almost changes the surface somehow. It just doesn't feel as fresh to me. The other thing, there's a third reason, and that is that I like to give my brain kind of time to process what is happening on the paper. And so during drying time, not only is the paint continuing to work, but my mind is kind of planning the next step. And so if I rush into the next phase of painting without really thinking about what I want to do next, without really kind of studying the painting and making those next step plans, I feel like I'm not actually as prepared to achieve a successful outcome as if I just allow myself that time to kind of process and plan. So those are the reasons I don't blow dry. I really, rather than rushing to the next phase, I want to give myself that time to evaluate and plan, and I think it's been to my benefit that I do that. So often painting will evolve in a way that's completely different than what I might have planned or anticipated when I started. As I kind of react to what I see on the paper. A little more goethite to add some little line here. This brush that I'm using today is, I actually ordered it from Australia because I was looking for alternatives to the Loose Goose from Cheap Joe's Art Stuff. For those of you who don't live in the USA, and you know, Cheap Joe's shipping is very expensive outside of the US. And so this is a Neef, Neef dagger brush. I have two sizes. There's a 3/8 inch and a 1/4 inch. And it has that same kind of softness. I don't know if it's a squirrel brush or I don't think it says. Mahogany Kazan by Neef dagger brush. So I'm really liking it actually. This is probably the closest thing I've seen to the Cheap Joe's dagger scrapers. So if you are looking for a brush and can't order from Cheap Joe's, see if you can't find this Neef dagger and see if that might work for you. Maybe they ship it to your area. And it was a little while ago that I ordered it, so I can't really comment on pricing or anything like that. I don't remember. Let's see here. Okay, so I feel like I don't have the road exactly the way I want it. It should actually be a little narrower up here. And so I'm actually going to grab maybe just a tiny brush so I have just a bit more control. And I very rarely use a small brush, but I might as well see if I can't adjust that shape of the road just a little bit more before I call this finished. For the most part, I'm fairly pleased with how it's kind of come together. And I do have a fairly good feeling of that kind of receding distance and then that uphill stretch of road. In our community, actually, it's one of my favorite things is going down these country roads and then you look way ahead of you and you see that road just extending off into the distance, and it's so I don't know, it just gives that beautiful expansive feeling that I just really enjoy. I'm going to go just up a little bit here, like so, and that will give this a feeling of a clump of trees with these kind of behind it. Yeah, I think that kind of works. A little line to hint at the horizon there. I think a little bit of spatter in the foreground will give us a little bit of texture too. That would be fun. Let's see here. And if you have any other questions, leave them now because I'm almost done. We're almost going to shut this down so I can go get that Daniel Smith lesson uploaded. I'm not loving, actually, that's the lavender spatter, and it just is a little too, I don't know, something. It's not right. Let's try some of the murky Moonglow spatter instead. If you're spattering on to give texture on a road like this, you want to make sure you do it in the foreground. As it recedes, any spatter would get smaller, everything moving away into the distance. I'm going to soften some of that a little bit. So we kind of have to be a little bit in control how much spatter we put on. And I think softening it is probably a good choice. I'm not erasing it, I'm kind of blurring it a bit, but I think it's still giving that feeling of texture. And a little bit of line. I don't know, it's all an experiment. So basically, I guess the wrapping up, what you can consider a daily painting practice to be is that opportunity to spend more time in experimentation. A little less pressure because you're painting every day and it doesn't have to feel like each painting is this big commitment. but we just spend the time to get to know the scene. Evelyn, I am using your sketchbook that you gave me. It's beautiful, thank you. Um, oh, and someone's leaving a message for me on my phone. I have the ringer turned off in the studio, but not the machine apparently. So we're going to wrap up here. Leslie, you've commented, I get very confused. Darker by the horizon and lighter close up, or cooler horizon and warmer up close. That really depends on the time of day and sorry, I'm just leaning into the microphone. Really depends on the time of day and just the weather and all kinds of factors. So I really think when it comes to something like that, good observation will help you. When there is a horizon, you do want to pay very close attention to subtle changes, because if you're painting a scene where the landscape and the sky are very, very close, that little subtle transition between landscape and sky, you need to be able to depict it. Otherwise, nobody can see the horizon. So there's kind of that need to maybe slightly exaggerate what you see, so that you can get that feeling of depth and distance. And remembering also that when you're working from a photo, your photo tends to flatten your scene a bit. And so you have to then again plan to exaggerate a little bit, because you lost a little bit in translation from what the actual scene was and what the camera was able to capture. So do keep that in mind as well. We get to learn that when we're practicing and painting every day. We do get to spend more time thinking about that stuff, how what we paint lines up with what we see or what our camera is able to capture. So the more we do it, the better we get at kind of understanding that. Great reason to paint every day, knowing that you're building those brush muscles, brush miles, creative muscles. The more you do it, the stronger you get. And I think that's a great line to close our lesson on today. Thanks for coming into the studio with me. You know, I try to do these videos here in my studio every Tuesday morning exclusively for my Fearless Artist community members. Our goal for the Fearless Artist community is to have it feeling like your advanced class in watercolor. That's not to say that you won't, that I'm not going to give basic instruction as well. But this is a place for you to ask questions, for me to share what I'm learning, and to also engage with you and the questions that you ask in the community, to be able to offer, just lessons that are really tailored to what I'm seeing happen in the community and what you're learning there and what I'm learning. So thanks for joining me today. We'll continue talking about this idea of daily painting in the Fearless Artist community at fearlessartist.net. Have a great day.